I hope you guys are enjoying PCD so far. My name is David Glassett from Peaceful Valley Maps, and we're going to give you some Viz ideas to latch onto today. Let me set the scene for you a little bit if you don't know what that means. Let's say that you've got a brand new data set, a really rich one that you're really excited about, and just don't know where to begin with it. Or perhaps you've got some data that you feel like you're a little bit stuck in a rut, and what are you going to do to get out of that rut? Well, you can thank this man, Richard Saul Wurman. Perhaps the name's familiar, or maybe you've seen his picture somewhere. He's the inventor of TED conferences, but he's also the author of more than 90 books, including this one called Information Anxiety, which he wrote in 1989. Now, in Information Anxiety, he talks about the 5 hat racks, which are ways that you can present data. Well, he said these are the only 5 ways even that you can organize your data. They just happen to form a great acronym, L.A.T.C.H. L.A.T.C.H stands for location, which is you can organize your data spatially. Works really well for us because that generally lends itself to a map. Alphabetically, so A to Z, a way to organize your data, usually in a list or some sort of table. You've got time, where you can organize your data chronologically, often in a timeline. Then there's categories. So if you can group your data into areas of like attributes, then you've got categories that you can compare and contrast. And then there's hierarchy, where you typically start with a category and you add some degree of magnitude to it, so low to high or better to worse. Wurman in his later writings usually called hierarchy continuum, thinking that made it sound a little bit better, but that doesn't make the acronym any better, so we're going to stick with hierarchy and L.A.T.C.H. We're going to talk about 2 different data sets that we can look at to see these L.A.T.C.H principles in action. The first comes from my family. The second comes from our own NACIS conferences. So I have 6 great children, and on Halloween night, we get all dressed up, go out into the neighborhood, and collect pounds and pounds of candy. And it's amazing how quickly that candy can get dumped out of their bags at the end of the night, examined, and started to be eaten. Well, after the assault on the pancreas and the liver is done for the evening, we get our kids to bed, and the next morning, what do you think happens? Another candy rush? No, actually, we have a L.A.T.C.H party, and we organize all of their candy data into L.A.T.C.H principles. For example, by location, we've mapped the neighborhood to see where have people handed out candy at the door, where have they put a bowl on the porch step, or where have they kept their light off and not handed out candy. In this picture, we have the candy organized by where it had been invented. Alphabetical is pretty straightforward. We organize it from Dum Dum to Tootsie Roll. Time, we've done things such as how long does it take to eat your candy? I don't actually have a picture of us doing that, so we're going to have to stick with the Tootsie Pop commercial from years ago. How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? We've got category, which is one of the most fun ones to do, where we take out our masking tape and make this huge Venn diagram on the floor of our living room, and we put all sorts of different categories. So the categories can include things like chocolate, nuts, caramel, nougat, Crispies, whether or not it has a candy shell, and we're putting candy where it belongs. Some of my favorite candy, like Starburst, they fall outside all of those, all of the entire circle. And then hierarchy, usually, like I said earlier, starts with category, but then develops into some degree of magnitude. Let's zoom in a little bit on this picture so we can see what's going on. What happens is our children will organize their candy by wrapper color, do a bar chart of the magnitude of wrapper color that they each have, and then each one gets assigned a random number. Each color is assigned a random number. And so they multiply out how many total points they get for each color wrapper, and there's a pretty arbitrary winner that gets to win the candy color wrapping competition. Another hierarchy that we really enjoy, or that was really concerning, at least to our children one year, was Skittle Colors. Now, Skittles come in 5 different colors, and their favorite color is strawberry. So they thought they were getting gypped, that there weren't enough strawberries in each of the packages. So they opened all 23 packages. They divided out how many of each color were in each package, added them up, averaged them out, and found that indeed strawberry was the lowest at 2.6, and lemon was the highest at 3.1. We didn't do any real advanced statistics on this to see if there was any statistical significance to those numbers, We just rounded them all to 3 and said, don't worry, they're all the same. Now let's move from the Halloween example to something maybe a little more germane to what we're doing here, and that's NACIS conferences. Now, happy 40th anniversary to NACIS. I created this data set just for this presentation of all the 41 different conferences that we've held through the years, including this year. And these are the different data fields that I collected on. Now you get to know the data and get to learn some very interesting things as you go through this process. We've met in 34 different cities. We've had 39 different conference venues, with Portland, Oregon, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin being the only ones where we've repeated a conference venue. 2 conference venues have been torn down and are now hospital sites. 2 more have been shut down as hotels and are now senior living centers. And one, it wasn't even a hotel to begin with. That was the University of Ottawa. Now, if we apply the Latch principles to our conference data set, each gets a basic location. These are where all the different conferences have been held. But you can have fun with location too, like what are the geographic extremes? Portland just happens to be the westernmost and the easternmost conference site. Just happens to be Portland, Oregon and Portland, Maine. Now Tacoma last year almost got the northernmost and the westernmost, but being just about 15 miles farther east of Portland, Oregon, it had to stick with just being the northernmost. And then St. Petersburg 2010 is our southernmost. If we move from location to alphabetical, we just pull all of those cities off of the map and line them up alphabetically on the side. Depending on the audience, that might be important to them. Another interesting approach to alphabetical that I thought would be kind of fun is the theme of each conference. Well, not every conference had a theme. It's only been less than half of them, and even most of them toward the beginning. But I decided to pull all those that did have a theme and what does it look like to organize those alphabetically. I saw some interesting patterns, like both 1990 and 1991 talked about mapping for a new decade. Apparently that was really concerning in the 90s. We got a lot of things about cartography for a changing world, new dimensions in cartography, new perspectives of cartography, all sorts of things like that. Time, moving after location and alphabetical, we've got just a simple chronology of where have we met through the years. So you start with 1980 and we progressively go until 2020. You can perhaps see some interesting trends this way, but there are different ways that you can visualize as you're trying to understand time. You can look at it in terms of when we started by each month. So most of our conferences are in October, just like this one, but we also started in August, we started in September, we even started one in November. We can explode it into a sort of a multivariate. I've got some more of these later, but here's time represented by start date, as well as the length of the conference. We throw in a couple other categories, such as what was the hotel brand of the conference site and the number of presentations. So you can see some interesting trends start to pull out in different ways. Let's move from time to category. Something pretty simple. Has a state or province hosted a conference or not? You have the category of east or west of the Mississippi. I really like the Minneapolis-St. Paul divide, since St. Paul is east of the Mississippi and Minneapolis is west. You got the category of which decade was the conference held in. It could be time, but it could also be category. You might be able to pull out some fun different trends that you look at there. Another category is which hotel brand was the conference site held at. Again, might be worth exploring in different ways, and we'll see an infographic later that explores this slightly differently. Was Practical Cartography Day held as part of the conference? It started in 2001 in Portland, Oregon. We didn't get it in 2002 in Columbus, but it was back in 2003 in Jacksonville, and it's been with us ever since. So happy 19th PCD to everyone. And then my favorite category is which NACIS conferences have I attended? My first was 2007 in Missoula. I did ride the carousel, it was great. And then it's been a fun ride ever since then. Now moving from category to hierarchy, like I said, you often start with a category and you add some degree of magnitude to it. So starting with which states and provinces have held a conference, you just add how many. And so Wisconsin, being our headquartered location, has had the most at 6, followed by 3, 2, and 1. Sorry to Minnesota that they don't get the opportunity to be bumped up into the next category this year. Hierarchy could also be how long the conference was in days. Most of them are 3 or 4 days, with St. Louis topping the charts at 6. Or the number of presentations. This might not be really important spatially. I've got another visual later that'll show us how it's worked out over time. Now we pull in some more of those multivariate ones. They're kind of fun to look at and combine some of the different latch principles. So we've got location based on where the different proportional circles are. We've got things like the category of the length of conference in days, or hierarchy, depending on how you want to look at it, and the hierarchy of number of presentations. Now we'll just slightly change this, and we'll go to kind of a monochrome scheme. So the color now is length of days of conference. Number of presentations is still the same, and so is location. Now we'll change the color to, instead being the length of the conference, to when the conference started by year. So the lighter color is the earlier conferences, and the later color, the darker color, are the later conferences. And we can get total crazy and go with shape for the length of the conference. Color is still the year, and the size is still a presentation, and do all sorts of fun different latch interactions. So here's the last one. I was talking about the number of presentations over time in a bar chart, but we've also got different categories like, was it held east or west of the Mississippi down along the bottom, or whether or not there is a practical cartography day. We've got the color based on where the brand of the conference site. And we've got location on the map in the background. So it's all sorts of things that you can do to explore and be creative with the data set that you have. So that's what Latch is. It's location, alphabet, time, category, and hierarchy to organize your data set. So go out and explore your data set. I know I went through some of these maps pretty quickly, so you can go to my website. I've got the tiny URL there. Go to tinyurl.com/NACIS-latch, and you'd be able to explore those as well as the data set yourself. So go explore, have fun, and create some great visuals.
Thanks so much, David. That was great. So I know someone mentioned or asked a question about the availability of the data set. Do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. Thanks, Katie. The data set is live. There is a link that I put at the very end of the presentation. If you follow that link, it's just a blog post. You can see all the maps. You can examine them a little more closely. But there's also a link in there to the data set, so you can play around with it wherever or however you want. I'd love to see what else other people come up with it.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great. Are there any other questions from the audience? I'm looking through our Slack channel. Give everyone just a second more. Okay, well, wonderful. Thank you so much, David. That is just great.
You bet. Thank you.